Zach's still here, sleeping on the couch. We barely speak now, avoiding each other's gaze when we pass in the hallway. The air feels thick with unspoken words and regret. This morning, I was helping Michael with his physical therapy exercises when he winced in pain. I reached out to steady him, but he flinched away from my touch. The rejection stung, even though I knew I deserved it. "I'm fine," he muttered, his jaw clenched. "Just give me a minute." I stepped back, watching helplessly as he struggled to complete the routine. The silence between us stretched out, filled only by his labored breathing. Later that evening, I was in the kitchen when I heard a crash from the bedroom. I rushed in to find Michael on the floor, surrounded by scattered papers and an overturned drawer. "What happened?" I asked, kneeling beside him. His eyes were wild, angry. "What the hell is this?" He thrust a small box of condoms at me, along with a t-shirt I didn't recognize. My heart stopped. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Caroline Michael's voice was low, dangerous. "Tell me the truth. Now." I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. The room seemed to spin around me as the weight of my betrayal came crashing down. I choked out, tears welling up in my eyes. "Michael, I'm so sorry. It was with Zach." The words hung in the air for a moment before Michael exploded. He struggled to his feet, his face contorted with rage and pain. "Zach, your fucking brother." I flinched at the volume of his voice, at the raw hurt in it. It was just a mistake. It didn't mean anything. But Michael wasn't listening. He stormed out of the bedroom, his injuries forgotten in his fury. I scrambled after him, terrified of what he might do. Zach was in the living room, rising from the couch with a confused expression. Before I could stop him, Michael lunged at him, his fist connecting with Zach's jaw. "Michael, stop," I screamed, but it was like I wasn't even there. The two men grappled, crashing into furniture. I could see the pain on Michael's face as he pushed his injured body beyond its limits, driven by rage and betrayal. Finally, I managed to wedge myself between them. "Please stop," I begged, tears streaming down my face. Zach backed away, his lip bleeding, his eyes wide with shame and fear. Without a word, he grabbed his jacket and fled the apartment. I turned to Michael, reaching out to him, but he recoiled from my touch. "Don't," he spat, his voice breaking. "Just don't." As he limped back to the bedroom, slamming the door behind him, I sank to the floor, surrounded by the wreckage of our lives. Not long after I stood in the kitchen, staring blankly at the coffee maker as it sputtered and hissed, the house felt emptier than ever before. Zach was gone, having packed his things and left without a word after the confrontation with Michael. The silence was deafening. I poured the coffee into a mug, my hands shaking slightly. As I turned to head back to the living room, I caught sight of Michael sitting up the dining table. His eyes were fixed on the newspaper in front of him, but I could tell he wasn't reading it. The tension between us was palpable. "Do you want some coffee?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Michael didn't look up. "No," he said flatly. I lingered for a moment, hoping he'd say something else, anything else, but he remained silent, his jaw clenched tight. With a heavy sigh, I retreated to the living room. Days passed like this. Michael and I moved around each other like ghosts, barely acknowledging each other's presence. When our eyes did meet, all I saw in his was hurt and betrayal. It was as if he couldn't look at me without seeing Zach's hands on me, without imagining our stolen moments. I tried to bridge the gap between us. I'd start conversations about mundane things, the weather, what we needed from the grocery store, how his physical therapy was going. But Michael's responses were always curt, devoid of any warmth or emotion. One evening, I couldn't take it anymore. "Michael, please, can we talk about this?" He finally looked at me, his eyes cold. "What's there to talk about, Caroline? You cheated on me with your brother." His words hit me like a slap. "I know. I'm so sorry. I never meant. Never meant what he cut me off, never meant to hurt me, never meant for me to find out, which is it." I fell silent, tears welling up in my eyes. Michael shook his head and left the room, leaving me alone with my guilt and regret. So as the days turned into weeks, I felt myself keying deeper into isolation. Friends called, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. How could I explain what had happened? The shame was overwhelming. I threw myself into housework, scrubbing every surface until my hands were raw. It was a futile attempt to cleanse myself of the guilt that clung to me like a second skin. At night, I'd lie awake in bed, acutely aware of the distance between Michael and me. We'd gone from being inseparable to strangers sharing a bed. I longed to reach out and touch him, to feel the warmth of his skin against mine, but I knew I'd lost that right. In those quiet hours, the full weight of my actions crashed down on me. I'd shattered the trust Michael had in me. I'd driven Zach away, possibly forever. The life we'd built together was in ruins, and it was all my fault. I stared at the little plastic stick in my hand, my heart pounding. 2 lines, positive. The bathroom suddenly felt too small, the walls closing in on me. I sank to the cold tile floor, my mind reeling. Pregnant, with Zach's child. The reality of it hit me like a punch to the gut. How could this happen? One mistake, one moment of weakness. And now, this? Days passed in a blur as I grappled with the decision before me. Every time I looked at Michael, guilt gnawed at me. The child growing inside me would be a constant reminder of my betrayal, a living testament to the worst mistake of my life. I couldn't do it. I couldn't bring this child into the world, couldn't face Michael every day knowing what I'd done. The weight of it all was crushing me. With shaking hands, I made the call to schedule the appointment. Each ring felt like an eternity until finally, a calm voice answered. As I spoke, my words felt distant, like someone else was talking through me. The day of the procedure, I told Michael I was going shopping. Another lie to add to the pile. The clinic was sterile and quiet, filled with other women avoiding eye contact. I wanted to run, to go home and pretend none of this had ever happened, but I knew I couldn't. Afterward, I felt empty, physically, emotionally. I drove home in a daze, barely registering the world around me. The house was quiet when I got back. Michael was napping on the couch, his leg propped up. I watched him sleep, tears streaming down my face. I couldn't keep lying to him. I couldn't keep pretending. Michael, I said softly, gently shaking him awake. We need to talk. He blinked up at me, confusion turning to wariness as he saw my tear-stained face. What's wrong? I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I need to tell you everything. About Zach, about today. As the words tumbled out, I watched Michael's face change. Shock, anger, disgust, heard a kaleidoscope of emotions flashed across his features. When I finished, the silence was deafening. I want a divorce, he said finally, his voice flat and cold. I can't do this anymore, Caroline. It's over. I nodded, numb. I had known deep down that this would be the outcome, but hearing the words out loud shattered something inside me.